My name is David, and this happened 3 years ago during what the weather service called the worst thunderstorm our county had seen in over a decade. I live with my wife Sarah and our 2 kids, Emma, who was 8 at the time, and Jake, who was 6. We're in a pretty rural area outside of Portland, Oregon. Not completely isolated, but far enough out that our nearest neighbor is about a quarter mile down the road. The storm had been building all afternoon. You know that heavy, oppressive feeling you get when the air pressure drops. The sky looked almost green, and there was this electrical charge in the air that made your skin feel tingly. Sarah had been checking the weather app obsessively all day, and by evening, they were predicting golf ball-sized hail and winds up to 70 miles per hour. The rain started around 8 o'clock. Not gradually, like most storms. It went from nothing to absolutely torrential in about 30 seconds. The sound on our metal roof was deafening. You couldn't have a conversation without shouting. Then the power went out. That wasn't unusual. We lose power probably 4 or 5 times a year when storms roll through. Sarah lit some candles while I grabbed the emergency radio and a couple of flashlights. The kids thought it was an adventure. About an hour into the outage, I decided to check the main electrical panel in our basement. Sometimes it's just a tripped breaker. I told Sarah I'd be right back and headed downstairs with my flashlight. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The main line coming into the house had been cut. Not damaged by the storm, not pulled loose by wind. Cut, clean through, like someone had taken wire cutters to it. The copper ends were bright and sharp. I ran back upstairs and told Sarah what I'd found. Her first instinct was to call the police, but when she picked up the landline, there was no dial tone. I tried my cell phone next. No signal. I went back down to check the phone lines. Sure enough, they'd been cut as well. Same clean cut, same fresh copper showing. Someone had deliberately cut our power and phone lines during a thunderstorm. They'd trapped us in the house with no way to communicate with the outside world. We decided to wait it out. Lock all the doors and windows, keep the kids close, and hope that whoever had done this was just trying to mess with us. That's when we heard the first sound. A rhythmic tapping, like someone gently knocking on glass. It was coming from the kitchen. I grabbed a flashlight and headed toward the sound. The tapping continued as I made my way through the dark house. When I reached the kitchen, I realized it was coming from the window above the sink. I approached slowly, keeping the flashlight beam low. Then I saw him. A man was standing just outside the window, maybe 6 feet away. He was soaked from the rain, wearing what looked like a black rain jacket. He was staring directly at me. The knocking stopped. We looked at each other for what felt like an eternity. Then slowly, the man raised his hand and waved at me. Not a friendly wave, more like a taunt. I backed away and ran to the living room. "Sarah," I whispered urgently, "get the kids upstairs, now. There's someone outside." I went back to check the kitchen window, but the man was gone. I checked every window on the first floor, but I didn't see him anywhere else. That almost made it worse. I was checking the lock on the front door when I heard Sarah scream upstairs. I ran up the steps 2 at a time. Sarah was standing in our bedroom doorway, staring out the window. "He's out there," she said, "right by the driveway." I looked out the window. The same man in the black rain jacket was standing next to my truck, maybe 30 feet from the house. He was doing something to the vehicle, crouched down by the tires. As if he heard us, the man stood up and looked directly at our bedroom window. Even from that distance, I could see him smile. Then he held up something in his hand. A knife. He'd slashed our tires. I ran to our bedroom closet and pulled out the shotgun I keep there for home defense. Sarah was gathering the kids in our bedroom, trying to keep them calm. "Daddy, what's happening?" Emma asked. "Just a power outage, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But Jake was looking out the window. "Who's that man?" he asked. The man was closer now, maybe 20 feet from the house. He was standing in our front yard, just staring up at our bedroom window. The rain was still pouring down, but he didn't seem to care. I opened the window slightly and shouted down at him, "Get off my property. I've got a gun and I've called the police." Instead of leaving, he laughed. It was a sound I'll never forget, high-pitched and delighted. "No, you haven't," he shouted back. "Your phones don't work, and your truck doesn't work either." I moved Sarah and the kids into the master bathroom. It was the most interior room on the second floor, with no windows and only one door. We sat there in the dark for what felt like hours. Around 3 in the morning, the storm finally started to calm down. That's when we heard the sound that made my blood freeze. Someone was trying the front door handle. I left Sarah with the kids and crept downstairs with the shotgun. The man was on our back deck now, trying the sliding glass door handle. When it didn't open, he cupped his hands against the glass and peered inside. I raised the shotgun and pointed it at the door. "I can see you. Leave now or I'll shoot." He stepped back from the door, but he didn't leave. Instead, he pressed his face against the glass and smiled. Then he held up a set of keys, my keys, from my truck. He dangled them for a moment, then threw them into the yard. I unlocked the sliding door and stepped onto the deck with the shotgun raised. "Get the hell off my property." The man was standing at the edge of the deck, maybe 10 feet away. Up close, I could see he was younger than I'd thought, probably in his 20s, but his eyes were what scared me the most. They were completely calm. "You're not going to shoot me," he said conversationally. "Try me. You've got kids upstairs. If you fire that thing, they'll hear it. They'll know their daddy killed someone. Is that really what you want?" He took a step closer, then another. "What do you want?" I asked. "I want to see how scared I can make you," he said simply. That's when I heard the sirens. The man heard them too. His smile faltered for the first time all night. Our neighbor, Mrs. Chen, had seen someone with a flashlight moving around our property and called it in as a possible break-in. The man realized he was trapped. He looked at me one more time, and that smile came back. "This was fun," he said. Then he vaulted over the deck railing and disappeared into the woods. The police searched for him for hours, but they never found him. Detective Morrison said there had been similar incidents in 3 other counties over the past year, always during severe weather, always involving cut power and phone lines, always targeting isolated rural families. They never caught him. We moved to town 6 months later. Every time storm clouds gather, we all get anxious. I still have that shotgun, but I hope I never have to find out if I can actually pull the trigger when it matters most. My name is Marcus, and this happened during what was supposed to be a simple 3-day hiking trip in the Cascade Mountains. My girlfriend Lisa and I had planned this trip with our friends Tyler and Rachel. We'd all been hiking together for years, and we considered ourselves pretty experienced. The weather forecast had called for partly cloudy skies with a chance of afternoon showers. What they didn't predict was the massive thunderstorm system that rolled in on our second night. We'd made camp at our usual spot, about 8 miles into the trail. It's this beautiful little clearing next to a creek, surrounded by old-growth Douglas firs. The first sign that something was wrong came around 6 in the evening. The temperature dropped suddenly, maybe 15 degrees in the span of an hour. The rain started around 8 o'clock. Within 30 minutes, it had turned into a deluge. The wind was howling through the trees, and the lightning was constant. Flash after flash, with thunder so loud you could feel it in your chest. Our tents were getting battered. Rachel's tent actually collapsed when a gust caught it just right. That's when Tyler remembered the ranger station. He'd seen it on the map earlier, maybe half a mile north of our campsite. It was marked as abandoned, but it would be shelter. The half-mile hike took us almost an hour. We kept having to stop and wait out particularly violent lightning strikes. By the time we saw the ranger station, we were all soaked to the bone and shivering. The building was bigger than I'd expected. 2 stories, built out of rough-hewn logs with a steep metal roof. The front door was unlocked. That should have been our first warning sign. The inside was dark and musty, but it wasn't completely empty. There was still furniture inside. A large wooden table, some chairs, filing cabinets. Everything was covered in dust, but it looked like whoever had been here last had left in a hurry. There were papers scattered on the table, a coffee mug, even a jacket hanging on a peg by the door. Tyler checked the map. According to this, it was decommissioned in 2018, so about 4 years. But as we looked around more carefully, things didn't add up. Some of the papers on the table looked relatively fresh. There was even a calendar on the wall that showed the current year. Rachel found a propane lantern and managed to get it working. The warm light revealed more details. There were sleeping bags in one corner, a camp stove, canned food in the cabinets. Someone had definitely been using this place recently. We decided to stay for the night. The storm was still raging outside, and we didn't have anywhere else to go. We set up our wet sleeping bags on the floor and tried to get some rest. I was just starting to drift off when Tyler shook me awake. "Marcus, look at this." He was shining his flashlight on a logbook that had been sitting on the table. It was open to a page dated just 2 weeks earlier. Someone had been recording weather observations, wildlife sightings, but the entries stopped abruptly on September 15th. The last entry was incomplete. Something wrong with the lightning. They're not random. They're... And that was it. The sentence just stopped. Lisa found something else in one of the filing cabinets. An incident report dated September 16th about a missing person. A ranger named Dave Kowalski, who had failed to return from his shift. His truck had been found at the trailhead, but there was no sign of him. The report noted unusually frequent and intense lightning activity that night. As if summoned by our conversation, a massive lightning strike hit somewhere very close. That's when Rachel noticed something odd. "Did you guys see that?" she asked, pointing toward the north-facing window. The lightning, it hit the same spot twice. We all looked out the window, waiting for the next flash. When it came, we could see what she meant. The lightning was striking a tall pine tree about 100 yards from the station, and when the next flash came, it hit the same tree again. It kept hitting that same tree over and over, at least a dozen strikes until the tree was smoking and starting to burn. Then the strikes moved to a different tree, about 50 yards to the east. Same pattern. "That's definitely not normal," Tyler admitted. I was starting to understand what Dave Kowalski had meant. The lightning wasn't random. It was following some kind of pattern systematically hitting specific targets. That's when we heard the footsteps on the stairs. They were slow and deliberate, coming from the second floor. We hadn't checked upstairs when we arrived. Tyler grabbed his flashlight and the axe he'd brought for splitting firewood. "Stay here," he whispered, "then climb the stairs." "There's nobody up here," he called down, "but you guys need to see this." We climbed the stairs and found Tyler in the main observation room. The walls were lined with windows, but it wasn't the view that had caught his attention. It was the equipment. The room was filled with electronic devices, monitors, keyboards, boxes with blinking lights. On the main table, there was a laptop computer that was still running. The screen showed a topographical map with various markers. As we watched, one of the markers began blinking, and seconds later, we saw a lightning strike hit that exact location outside. "This is how they're doing it," Tyler whispered. "They're controlling the lightning." Lisa found a large cylindrical device mounted near one of the windows. "I think it's some kind of laser." High-powered lasers can create ionized channels in the atmosphere, providing a path for lightning to follow. If you had enough power and the right equipment, you could direct lightning strikes to specific targets. That's when Rachel found Dave Kowalski's body. He was in a storage closet, slumped over in a chair. He'd been dead for a while. On the desk in front of him was a note. "They're testing weapons, military, using the forest as a target range. I tried to report it, but they found out. If anyone reads this, get away from here. They kill people who know too much." We got out of that building as fast as we could. The hike back was a nightmare. The artificial lightning strikes were getting closer, and we could hear vehicles moving through the trees, voices calling out coordinates. We made it back to the trailhead just as the sun was coming up. We reported what we'd found to the local sheriff, but he didn't seem interested. He told us that Dave had died of a heart attack and that the equipment was just old weather monitoring gear. The official story was that we'd been hallucinating from hypothermia and stress. But I know what we saw that night. Someone is using our national forest as a testing ground for weapons, and they're willing to kill anyone who gets too close to the truth. I haven't been hiking in the Cascades since then. Every time I see lightning now, I wonder if it's really natural. My name is Claire, and I live alone on a 40-acre farm about an hour outside of Boise, Idaho. I inherited the property from my grandfather 5 years ago. The nearest neighbor is 3 miles away, and the main road is half a mile from my house. I've always been security conscious. I have motion sensors around the perimeter, security cameras covering all approaches to the house, and a comprehensive alarm system. I also keep a pistol in my nightstand and a shotgun in the hall closet. This happened last month, during the worst thunderstorm I'd experienced since moving to the farm. The Weather Service had issued severe thunderstorm warnings all day. By evening, the sky looked apocalyptic. Dark clouds stretched from horizon to horizon. The rain started around 8 o'clock, and within minutes it had turned into a downpour. The wind was incredible, bending the trees at impossible angles. Then the lightning started. At first, it seemed normal. Frequent flashes, loud thunder. But after about 20 minutes, I started to notice something odd. The lightning strikes seemed to be following a pattern. The first strike hit my security light at the end of the driveway. The second one took out the motion sensor on the north side. The third hit the camera mount on the southeast corner. Within an hour, I'd lost 6 cameras, 4 motion sensors, and 3 security lights. My entire perimeter detection system was being systematically destroyed. one precise strike at a time. I went to my security monitor to check what was left of my camera feeds. Most screens were dark, but I still had 2 cameras working, one covering the front porch and one watching the barn. I was cycling through the feeds when I saw something that made my blood freeze. There was a man standing at the edge of my property, maybe 200 yards from the house. He was holding what looked like a device with a long barrel and scope connected to a backpack by thick cables. He was aiming it at one of my remaining cameras, and as I watched, a brilliant beam of light shot out. A second later, lightning struck the camera, and that feed went dark. He was creating the lightning strikes. Someone had technology that could direct lightning to specific targets, and he was using it to blind my security system. I grabbed my cell phone to call 911, but there was no signal. I tried the landline, but that was dead too. I was completely cut off, and someone with military-grade weaponry was systematically destroying my ability to see what was happening. I went to the gun safe and retrieved my rifle. It had a good scope, and I was a decent shot. If this person wanted to play games with directed energy weapons, I'd show them what old-fashioned ballistics could do. I positioned myself at the upstairs bedroom window that gave me the best view of the property. The man was still there, now closer to the house, maybe 150 yards away, well within range. But as I watched through the scope, something else caught my attention. There were more of them. At least 3 other figures moving through the tree line, all carrying similar equipment. This wasn't just one person with experimental technology. This was a coordinated operation. I tried to think of reasons why someone would target my property specifically. Was it just random? A test of their equipment? Or was there something about my farm that made it attractive to them? That's when I remembered the conversation I'd had with my grandfather before he died. He'd mentioned that during World War II, the government had used part of the property for some kind of testing. He had been vague about the details, but he'd said there were still things buried out there that the military might want back someday. Another lightning strike hit my remaining barn camera. Now I was completely blind except for the front porch camera, which wouldn't last much longer. I made a decision. Instead of waiting for them to come to me, I was going to take the fight to them. I grabbed my rifle, extra ammunition, and a powerful flashlight. If they thought they could terrorize a lone woman with their fancy gadgets, they were about to learn otherwise. I slipped out the back door and made my way toward the tree line where I'd seen the figures moving. The storm was still raging, which would provide cover for my approach. The constant thunder would mask any noise I made. It took me about 10 minutes to work my way around to a position where I had a clear shot at the nearest intruder. Through my scope, I could see him clearly now. He was wearing military-style fatigues and some kind of high-tech headset. The device he was carrying looked like something out of a science fiction movie. I lined up the shot and squeezed the trigger. The man dropped immediately. His companions must have heard the gunshot over the storm because they started shouting and moving toward my position. That's when the real lightning started. Not the controlled, targeted strikes they'd been using before, but massive natural bolts that lit up the entire sky. The storm was reaching its peak, and the combination of natural and artificial electrical activity was creating a feedback loop. I saw one of the remaining intruders get struck by a genuine lightning bolt. The energy discharged from their equipment must have made them into perfect conductors. He convulsed for several seconds before collapsing. The last 2 figures were retreating now, dragging their equipment and trying to get away from the electrical chaos they'd created. I took another shot and missed, but it was enough to send them running. I made my way back to the house as the storm finally began to subside. In the morning, I found the body of the man I'd shot. He had no identification, but his equipment was definitely military grade. There were serial numbers and manufacturer marks that indicated it was prototype technology, probably worth millions of dollars. I called the sheriff's department and reported the incident as a home invasion, which technically it was. They took the body and the equipment, but I never heard anything official about what they found or who the intruders worked for. A few weeks later, I got a visit from two men in dark suits who claimed to be from the Department of Defense. They asked a lot of questions about what I'd seen and what I'd done with any evidence I might have collected. They were very polite, but their message was clear. Forget what happened, and don't talk about it with anyone. They also made me an offer to buy the farm for well above market value. Cash deal, no questions asked, quick closing. When I declined, they said they understood, but suggested I might want to reconsider if I had any more unusual weather events in the future. I haven't had any more visits from people with lightning guns, but I've upgraded my security system significantly. I also spent some time researching the history of my property and found references to classified military experiments conducted here in the 1940s and 50s. Whatever they buried out there, someone still wants it. I'm not planning to sell the farm, but I am preparing for the possibility that they might come back. Next time, I'll be ready for them. And next time, I might not be so generous about letting the survivors escape.